What if most human suffering didn't come from trauma, or lack of money, or even lack of meaning, but instead from misusing words? What if philosophy wasn't about discovering hidden truths, but about untangling knots we tied ourselves in with language? And what if one man believed he had solved all of philosophy, walked away from it entirely, then returned years later to say, "I was wrong"? Not a small wrong, a catastrophically wrong. Today's episode is about Ludwig Wittgenstein, a man who split philosophy in two, destroyed his own ideas, and quietly reshaped psychology, linguistics, science, religion, and therapy without ever trying to. You'll question what you mean when you say truth, whether thoughts exist without language, if private experience can ever be fully expressed, and whether most arguments are even real in the first place. This is not an episode about answers, it is an episode about limits. Wittgenstein was born in 1889 in Vienna into immense wealth, crushing expectation, and artistic brilliance. But the details of his life matter less than his temperament. He was intensely serious, morally extreme, allergic to intellectual vanity, and obsessed with precision. He wasn't interested in clever arguments. He wanted clarity, even if it destroyed the question itself. And that obsession produced two entirely different philosophies, so different in fact that scholars talk about it in early Wittgenstein and late Wittgenstein. And the shocking thing is they directly contradict each other, yet both are considered foundational. Let's start with the first. Early Wittgenstein asked a brutal question. What can be said clearly and what must be left unsaid? Not what is true, what is good, what is meaningful, but what can language actually do? Wittgenstein claimed that the world is the totality of facts, not things. This sounds abstract, but it's radical. He wasn't saying the world is made of objects. He was saying the world is made of states of affairs. A cup on a table isn't just a cup. It's the fact that the cup is on the table. Reality to him was structured, and language worked only if it mirrored that structure. Here's the core idea of Tractatus. Language pictures reality. Just like a map represents terrain, a meaningful sentence represents a possible fact. Words are objects. Sentence structure is relationship between objects. Meaning is equal to shared logical form. If language doesn't match reality structure, it doesn't just become false, it becomes meaningless. What can language not do though? This is where Wittgenstein detonates philosophy. He says language cannot meaningfully talk about ethics, God, the self, the meaning of life, and metaphysics. Not because these are unimportant, but because they can't be pictured. They don't correspond to facts. They can only be shown, not said, which leads to his most famous line, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." This is not nihilism, it's restraint. If Wittgenstein is right, then most philosophy is nonsense. Most debates are category errors. Most arguments are language running without reference. And shockingly, even his own book may be nonsense. Which is why many believe the Tractatus is intentionally self-destructing, a ladder you climb, then throw away. Wittgenstein believed he had solved philosophy, defined its limits, ended its questions. So he left. He became a soldier, a schoolteacher, a gardener, an architect, and yet something didn't sit right. Because real language didn't behave the way his theory demanded. People didn't speak in logical atoms. They spoke messily, contextually, humanly. And slowly, painfully, Wittgenstein turned on himself. This is where Wittgenstein became dangerous. Late Wittgenstein drops the picture theory entirely. He says the meaning of a word is its use in the language. Not definitions, not mental images, not objects, but how it's actually used. Words are tools, and tools don't have meaning in isolation. A hammer means nothing outside of a task, a practice, a form of life. Wittgenstein introduced the idea of language games. Language is not one system, it's many systems. Scientific language, moral language, religious language, emotional language, legal language. Each has rules, context and purposes, and problems arise when we mix games, import rules from one into another, demand certainty when none exists. Most philosophy collapses here. Because words don't have strict definitions, they have overlapping similarities, like family members. No single feature defines them all, but patterns emerge. This destroys the idea that concepts have hidden essences. There is no true meaning behind words, only usage. This is one of the most important ideas of the 20th century, and Wittgenstein asks, can a language exist that only one person understands? A language of pure inner sensation? He argues no, because language requires rules. Rules require public criteria, and meaning requires shared practice, even if your most private pain is learned through public language. This reshapes psychology, therapy, and the consciousness studies. So Wittgenstein no longer sees philosophy as theory. He sees it as therapy, not curing the world, but curing confusion. Philosophy doesn't solve problems, it dissolves them by showing where language slipped, where assumptions hid, where questions never made sense to begin with. This is devastating to the ego and liberating to the mind. Late Wittgenstein doesn't dismiss religion, he reframes it. Religion is not a hypothesis, it's a language game. You don't evaluate prayer the way you evaluate physics. Religion expresses commitment, orientation, meaning, and not facts. Trying to disprove religion misses the point entirely. And ethics is not something you state, it's something you live. Wittgenstein quietly influenced cognitive behavioural therapy, linguistics, AI language models, anthropology, postmodern thought, modern psychotherapy. Every time someone says, let's clarify what you mean by that, that's Wittgenstein. Every time a debate collapses once definitions are examined, that's Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein didn't give us answers, he gave us discipline. The discipline to ask, does this question make sense? What game am I playing? What am I assuming language can do? And maybe his final gift is this. Not all confusion needs solving. Some confusion needs seeing clearly. And once you see clearly, silence becomes wisdom.